Welcome to our 7th Orchard Talk in the series about best practices in care for our Heritage Apricot Orchard. The orchard is located right next to the Los Altos History Museum, and at the museum, we strive to inspire our community to care for our city landmarks. The topic here is tree replacement. In our previous orchard talk, we discussed some of the reasons why trees are dying due to pathogens. And so the unhealthy trees have to be removed to make room for the new healthy young trees. In our heritage orchard, you can see the babies next to the grannies. So we have trees ranging in age from 1 to 30 years. Now, you may be used to seeing in commercial orchards that all the trees are the same age, and that's because the trees are usually removed and replaced at the same time. But our heritage orchard has been in production for almost 120 years. So there's been turnover in trees. And the goal of our replacement has been to maintain a productive orchard on the order of 450 trees. There's enough room for that. So that means replacing the sick trees and keeping a good balance of the young and the old. So currently, we have 164 young trees, 51 middle-aged trees, and 123 old trees. So here you see our city orchardist, Phil Deach, instructing volunteers in the best practices for planting new trees. And this was done this year. The planting occurs in January and February when the trees are dormant, but the new bare root trees have to be ordered way back in March of the previous year. And then the sick trees are removed usually at the end of the summer or fall when the pruning cycle begins. So what are the procedures? Well, during the pruning, each tree is individually inspected for evidence of disease. And the dead and dying branches are cut back to the stump. It's a whole other operation to remove the stump and the roots. And then the bare root saplings is quite a procedure to plant them. First of all, you have to dig a hole with an auger, and the sapling has to be centered in the hole. Then you toss in a cup of alfalfa to provide some nutrients for the new growing roots. Put the soil back in and water it really well. That was my job this year. So trees that have stopped producing apricots usually have some health issues and are cut. In this cross section of a stump, you can see the rot. So I counted the rings on the stumps that were cut, and these trees were 30 to 35 years old. I was told that the commercial orchards are replaced at 20 to 30-year intervals. So planting the trees starts with laying out a grid of locations about 20 feet apart. And our soil is so hard, it takes an auger to drill the holes for planting. And the bare root trees are kept moist in this barrel of water until they're ready to go into the holes. So in this photo, you see the grid of wrapped, newly planted trees filling in the holes between the old trees. I was thrilled to see that the babies planted last year bloomed, they leafed out, and they're bearing apricots this year. But there's several things that our city orchardist has to consider in replacing trees. First is the choice of the variety and the rootstock. And so the fruit-bearing branches are grafted onto hardy rootstock. In the previous orchard talk, we discussed the Lavelle rootstock, which is resistant to the canker bacterial disease. But there's also trade-offs in terms of size versus survival. Obviously, the larger ones cost more, but you can put more in for the same amount if you get the younger ones. Also, the variety is another consideration. So the heirloom variety that is planted is the Blenheim variety, the same thing that J. Gilbert Smith planted originally in this orchard. Nowadays, though, since this orchard is in a civic center, the orchardist has to consider issues like avoiding buried utilities. And then also the weather sometimes doesn't cooperate. The mud this year made it really difficult to get in and take out those stumps at a time when it would have been ideal. So how about the future? What are the plans for tree replacement to maintain a healthy, productive mix of ages? Well, we have room to plant 100 more trees. They're currently 350 about, and our capacity is about 450. But you know, we've been discussing in the Orchard Commons Committee that maybe we should be thinking about adjusting to climate change. What was, you know, the best variety for J. Gilbert Smith to plant back in the early 1900s may not be the best to help our orchard keep healthy throughout the coming decades. Maybe there would be room for considering some other varieties. These are all things under discussion as we adjust and think of our care of this orchard as a whole into the future decades. And then also under consideration is the Civic Center footprint. Our civic services are outgrowing their houses in the Civic Center now, and we've just got a new community center. And so keeping our heritage and meeting the needs of a growing community are some of the things that are under discussion now. So let's take a peek into the trends and the past history of our orchard. The number of trees has fluctuated over the years, from a high of 444 sites in 1988 to a low of 320 in 2004. So why? What happened here? Well, there have been droughts. Now, J. Gilbert Smith would have experienced the drought of the from 29 to 34. Think of the Dust Bowl days. There was also a drought in 1976 to 77. So that would have been 40 years later. But then the 5-year drought that started in 1987 to 92 resulted in this decline in trees in the orchard registered in 2004. So those were replaced in 2005. But then there have been, realized that the decline in trees is a result of what's happened in the previous decade. So in the drought of 2012 to 2013, there was actually no irrigation in the orchard between 2015 and 2016. And so even though trees were replaced in 2018, we see the lag effect 4 to 5 years later of trees being not so healthy and vulnerable to pathogens. So we'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts about tree replacement in our orchard? You can email me, Jane, at hello@losaltoshistory.org. I look forward to hearing from you.